Welcome, everybody who's on. I know we have some people who are going to come on shortly. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler. I'm going to be your instructor here today, and we're going to talk about failed focus, causes, consequences, and strategies, and how to help you soar and don't stress. So this acronym of SOAR we'll get into today, and we're going to start off talking about failed focus, what are some of the reasons that we all have some of this failed focus, what are some of the consequences, and some of the strategies. Some of the strategies are going to look at some of the aspects of emotional intelligence. We're going to look at mindfulness. So it should be quite interesting for you, some really good content that I'm looking forward to presenting. And what we'd like you to do now for a moment, just to see who we have on the line here, is in the chat box to be able to type in just your name and where you're from. And then I have with me Cheryl Ebner, my executive assistant. Cheryl, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
And maybe, Cheryl, any of the logistics just about if their chat box, or we are going to try to make this as interactive as we can, at least asking questions, having you respond. And so, Cheryl, anything about the chat box or later when we have questions and answers?
If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box during the webinar, and I'll keep track of them and Relly can answer them at some point. Also, we're going to do a question and answer at the end, and there's a little box. If you have your chat box open, you'll see the little box under the microphone on the left, and that is a keypad that you can use, and you can put in *6 at that point and hit 1, and you can be in the queue to answer questions or ask questions.
Great. Well, thanks, Cheryl. So we'll probably go for maybe close to about 40 minutes or so, and then we do want to have a question and answer time for you. And so, Cheryl, do we have folks that have been able to sign into the chat box now? Get an idea of who are some of the people we have?
We've got Judith Light from Colorado Springs. We've got Debbie Keener from New York. We've got Patrizia from Milan, Italy.
Oh, good.
And that's all that have checked in with us.
So far. Okay.
Colleen from California.
Great. Well, I know there's a lot of other people. We had a big turnout. Over 100 folks who have signed up for this. Some are going to be having the recording. So if you're one of those and you're not on live, you're going to get the recording of this. So let's move forward with failed focus. And I'm going to have you look at this slide here. If my computer can catch up with me for a moment. All right, so as you look at this, this is my name, and I just want to see if anything pops up when you notice this. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself, then we're going to get into some of the causes of failed focus. So if you notice anything, and I'm asking you about your focus, what do you notice about this name? I'll put it up here a couple times. And if you do have a thought about this, go ahead and type it in your chat box. So depending on where you're at, this is trying to sharpen your focus here. Cheryl, any responses?
I've got Judith. First is last reversed.
Ah, very good, Judith. All right, so my given name is Nadler, and my dad spelled Nadler backwards and got Reldan. That's how you say it, Reldan. And he noticed it just as, Judith, you noticed it. And he decided to give me that name, had to use some of his emotional intelligence and influence skills with my mother to, give me a weird name. So you're listening to a human palindrome. A palindrome is something you can spell backwards. And so just like you see on the screen now, the interesting part about this and why it leads to part of my story, one is balance, as you see that, but two is the part of discovery and thinking about discovery. My parents didn't tell me about my name. They said, here's your real name, it's Reldan, and we're going to call you Relly. As you see on here, they could have called me Danny from Reldan, but instead they decided to call me Relly. So they gave me the name but didn't say that it was reversible, just like Judith found out. So I thought I was like Robert and Bobby, William and Billy. I was Reldan and Relly. And just like you see on the screen, writing my name cursive in second grade, connecting the letters. So where was my focus? The focus was connecting the R to the E, connecting the L to the D, connecting the D to the A and the N. That was my focus. As we were talking about focus, somewhere on this yellow piece of paper, and we've all done this in school, 2/3 of the way down, my focus changed. I was no longer very minute and only connecting the letters, but I saw the pattern. Judith, just like you saw the pattern. And the pattern was that it was reversible. So I raced up to my teacher. Her name was Mrs. Toth, and very excitedly said, Miss Toth, look at my name. And she was very calm, and just like you would expect a leader, as we're going to be talking about leadership, she was able to say, well, really, that's very good. She took out, fumbled around in her drawer, and she had a huge star, and she took out the biggest star and put it on my paper. And then had everybody in the class spell their last name backwards. And, of course, no one had anything that made sense. So this idea of focus and discovery was really important for me. And I've had a couple since then, but that was a big discovery. And when you have an insight, and you may want to think about for you or for the people that you work with, who's having the insights? If you're the leader, is that you? Or are they also having it? When you have an insight, the right tempo of the brain in the prefrontal cortex, basically the neurons connect, and you have this aha, and it's an adrenaline rush. And so that's what I had then. So as you're thinking about focus, who's having all the ahas? And this idea of balance has really been important for me, just filling out those bubble sheets and seeing that everything's connected. So this has been a theme. What's some of your themes as you move forward? Is there something that stands out? And this idea of balance, I ended up getting a master's in a program called Confluent Education. Confluence is where two things come together, and there it was thinking and feeling. Really, it was pre-emotional intelligence. So this was, early on before we even had the terms of emotional intelligence. And that balance, when am I talking? When am I listening? When am I directing? When am I empowering? When am I encouraging? And when am I giving constructive feedback? There is this balance to this, and this is really this aspect of emotional intelligence that is part of what we're going to talk about to help your failed focus. One of the gaps in the field, and I know many of you are familiar with emotional intelligence, and that's probably why you're interested in some of this and along with the focus aspects, is what do you do to raise your emotional intelligence? Well, that's really been my focus probably the last 15 years. So this book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, there's a series of leadership keys, really the how-to aspects of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman, who popularized the subject, one of the questions he gets almost all the time, the first question is, it's great, I got it, what should I do about it? Well, this is the what to do about it, and some of the key things. This Leadership Keys app on the phone is free, so you're welcome to download that. It has a series of videos. So that's been my focus. How do I bring this more practical to you and to the organizations I work with? So I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm also a master certified coach. I work with a series of companies anywhere from Naval Special Warfare, DreamWorks Animation, Vanguard Health, a lot of agricultural companies, financial companies, really around bringing emotional intelligence to them. And the formula that we use is this formula that you see here. Empathy times insight times clarity. Those are multipliers, and they allow someone to be a star, just like Ms. Toth put a star on my paper. Star, in what we're talking about today, is someone in the top 10%. They're exceptional. They exceed expectations. They're highly effective. And the theme around focus is, if you stay on automatic, you're going to stay average. What are the few micro initiatives, and a lot we're going to talk about today, that can have a macro impact? If you stay in automatic, you stay average. And so the goal is, what do you need to do? What do your people need to do to be exceptional? And the formula is, the more you know about yourself, insight, times what you know about others, empathy, and it really is around clarity and these small micro initiatives. And I have this picture up here in regards to, we've all been in a traffic scene like this. We know this, insight, empathy. You're driving your car, and you notice way down ahead of you, this car still has their blinker on, or they're swerving. You quickly assess that and adjust. You go into the next lane. A lot of this emotional intelligence is about assessing, adjusting, assessing, adjusting. Your phone goes off, internal awareness. It's in your car, it's buzzing. And you fight your urge. You manage your urge to not look at that, because if you look down and all of a sudden you look up and everybody's stopped, that's a crash. So that's this idea that of insight, empathy, kind of internal awareness, external awareness, and adding clarity to that. So let me ask you, and you can maybe type this in, and Cheryl, I'll ask with you. From my experience, almost every leader I've worked with has underestimated their influence on others. They've underestimated how much influence they have on others. So just type in if you agree, or you could say yes, if you've seen that people underestimate their influence. And then we're going to talk about why and how that affects people's focus. So Cheryl, do we have any answers coming in?
Yeah, we've got 6 yeses.
Okay. So people who have signed in, so people do agree. And typically when I talk to organizations, most of us have underestimated our influence. There's a few people, like in the corporate world we know about, like the late Steve Jobs. He probably didn't underestimate his influence. He probably overestimated. But that also is maybe why he was, so effective in many of the endeavors he had. So you do agree, and the consequences are of this failed focus. How do I use my influence? The leader underperforms, the teams underperform. So this is critical because we want to be in a place where we can help people perform better. And if someone's out of focus, as you see these pictures of being out of focus, and we look at some of the causes and consequences of that, how often are you walking around out of focus? How often are the people walking around that you work with? They're just not as clear about what they want. They're not as clear about what you want. And one of the reasons this is all of us are on automatic. Think about this for a minute. How much are we on automatic? Meaning that our habits run us. It's always running like the stream is running. It doesn't stop, and we're on automatic. Well, we're on automatic as much as 95% of the time. Our habits are what's running us. It's not the focus in being intentional. And so a lot of this failed focus is trying to get people off automatic. Even if it's just that 95% went down to 90, went down to 85. That's the critical edge. Can you be intentional about what you want in regards to yourself and with others? And so one way to go about it is to get into this gap. Some of you have definitely seen this stimulus response. Well, most of us, if we're on automatic, don't have a gap. And if you want to be exceptional, part of it is increasing your EQ, emotional quotient, often called either EQ or EI, emotional intelligence, and that can help you with your IQ. I'm going to give some examples where often your IQ, how smart you are, is affected by your emotions, and that's why this emotional intelligence is so important. So what do you do in the gap? Well, one is to create a gap. How many of us don't even have a gap? So we're going to talk about some ways to create a gap, and then what are some of the things that you do when you're in the gap? Well, one is to ask better questions. Most of us are in this fast-paced world, constantly trying to move on to the next thing, and so we're probably not asking questions, we're giving answers. Are those right answers? Are they well thought out answers? Often not. This idea of mindfulness and bringing this present moment into things, self-management, what do you know about yourself, others management, and relationship management. So if we look at some of the causes of our failed focus. One is stress. So just pause for a moment and think about what's the most stressful thing for you. Could be all the unfinished things we have, emails and projects. Could be the work-life balance. What is it for you? Here's some of the major causes, and even this slide's a little out of focus, but you can kind of see workload is huge and people issues. Depending on your position as a manager, sometimes I think the people issues may even be bigger than the workload. And then dealing with personal work-life balance. Those are all key issues, that can be distractions. The other stress can be interruptions. So let me ask you this quick question. You can type this in. This is from some interesting research which I'll share. How often do you think we are interrupted? So maybe type in your answer. How often, either in minutes or hours, how often do you think we're interrupted? So type in your answer, then Cheryl, maybe we can just hear a couple of them, and maybe just use their first names if you have it. How often do you think we're interrupted?
I've got Dale every 50 minutes, Carla every few minutes, Ellen Young 200 times a day.
Ellen said 200 times. Okay, that's pretty good.
P. Sengali too often, Michael every 15 minutes,
okay.
Judy 10 times a day, Alan email.
All right.
Brad every 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to give you this information on this in just a second. How often of these interruptions do you think is caused by others and is caused by yourself? And you think about this, so the interruptions, if we look at the next slide, is how often? Some of the research by Gloria Mark here, every 3 minutes we are interrupted. So think about what that does to our focus. And here's what's surprising to me. 44% of the time from some of her research, it's ourself. We interrupt ourselves. I'm sure you're guilty of this as I am. I'm finishing an email, and I have maybe about another sentence or two. I'm writing something, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, pops up this question, hey, I wonder if I have a voicemail. I interrupt myself. I stop. I switch what I'm doing, and now I check my voicemail, really for no reason. And when we do this, what's the consequence of some of this is some of the research shown that every time we get interrupted, we do get back to it most of the time. Sometimes we don't, but it takes 23 minutes. And what we end up doing is typically finishing one of the tasks that we're interrupted with. So we allow the interruption to take priority. So kind of think about your prioritization and your focus. The interruption now has your priority, has your focus over what you need to do, and it takes another 23 minutes to get back to what you're doing. So what's the consequence of that? More stress, more frustration. In some of the research she did, what does this cause? And this number is huge, 588 billion. Really deals with stress, deals with work injuries, a lot of things. And I think this is a U.S. number, but you can see just how huge this is. So what do we know about your attention? What do we know about your focus? If you haven't seen either of these two books, these are great. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for economics. Daniel Goleman, I have this internet radio show where I interview folks. I've interviewed him a couple times, and one is just about this new book around focus. And so it really has gotten very popular, even in the mindfulness literature, is about focus. And if we look at this focus, and these two things are going to be the next piece that we're talking about, some of the causes of our focus issues. Thinking takes too much effort. So I just saw this. I hadn't seen this before from Martin Luther King. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. And Daniel Kahneman said what he called these affect heuristics. Think about your decisions. Judgments and decisions are guided directly by feelings of liking or disliking. And it's this piece, little deliberation or reasoning. So we're really not thinking that much. It's effortful, and I'll talk in a moment about why it's so effortful and the consequence of that. And Daniel Goleman popularized when we're flooded with emotions, it affects our thinking. And what you see here is when your amygdala which is the part of the brain that's in the back of the brain. We have two sides of it in the very back, very primitive. Any emotions you're having typically means blood and oxygen are going to the amygdala part. It's that fight, flight, fear, or faint. So now we got 4 Fs. Fight, flight, fear, faint happens when the amygdala gets activated. But guess what? When the amygdala has blood and oxygen, the part of the brain that has executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex, has less blood and oxygen. And so we get hijacked. The amygdala has privileged position, and it basically takes over your smarts. Or when you have this going, you're losing IQ points. So we talked about stress. If you don't have some of this emotional intelligence to monitor that, your IQ goes down. And depending on the person, now everybody's different. Someone could lose 2 or 3 points, IQ points. Someone could lose 15 IQ points. Someone could be down 15 IQ points for 2 or 3 hours. Somebody else has resilience, and they shake it off, and in about another 15, 20 minutes, when the cortisol settles down, they could be back to where they were. Everybody's different. But when I talk about IQ points, no executives want to hear this, that they're losing IQ points. No leaders want to hear this. And so a lot of this has to do with your emotional intelligence. So if you look at this, and this is some of the research, another person I interviewed was Matthew Lieberman, who's at UCLA, and he's a neuroscientist. Your self-control, which is in your prefrontal cortex, is limited. It doesn't, it gets used up really quick. And so the analogy is, if every time you're controlling your frustration, your irritation, a coworker, things at home, your deadlines, and you go, okay, and you manage your emotions, you regulate it, it burns through the brake shoes. And the brakes are the braking system. And again, that's a emotional regulation. It's in the prefrontal cortex. So if you got to work today and every time you put the brakes on, you had less brake shoes, this is what you would look like, or this is what your car would look like when you ended up in the parking lot. You've burned through your brake shoes. Now for us, this happens maybe at the end of the day. You've burned through your emotional regulation. It's no longer there. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about, some of the mindfulness, is important to bring this back because you only have so much capacity. And we talked about being on automatic. Well, the unconscious mind is so fast, and that's this fast thinking, and so I'm going to differentiate slow thinking. This is a term that Daniel Kahneman came up with, fast and slow. Pretty nice because it's simple. But the fast thinking, which we're on all the time, that's the automatic. That's that river flowing downstream, constant. 20,000 stimuli a second, is as much as operating at 1,200 miles per hour, like a jet. Where the slow thinking, which I'm advocating for us to get more focus, is to slow down and truly think. I mentioned earlier how we don't want to think that much. But this is where if you get this balance, you'll get a little bit more quality of the decisions. So fast thinking is involuntary, it's impulsive, it's intuitive, it's all the habits, it's kind of these mindsets we have. You quickly can detect someone's hostility or if they're angry at you from their faces. So here's where we want to spend more time. Effortful, intentional choice, voluntary, willpower, self-control, why it's important to get back your self-control. Learning, anytime you do a contrast of one thing to another, it's accentuating this slow thinking, but also this is kind of what burns through, this is the effortful part. So here's an experiment. Kind of think about where you would be on this experiment. You're in a room, and half of the people are given these chocolate chip cookies on the left. They smell good, they're hot, and you can just imagine how good they taste. The other half is given radishes. And so you may be, let's say you're in the radish group. So you're witnessing the other group having these hot chocolate chip cookies, they smell good, and you got the radishes. You've only been exposed to this for 5 minutes. So you've either eaten the radishes or you've eaten the cookies in 5 minutes. And then each group independently is given a puzzle. Well, they didn't know it, but the puzzle was impossible. It was not, you were not able to solve the puzzle. And what was the difference between the chocolate chip cookie folks and the radish folks in regards to solving the problem? And the reason I'm bringing this up is it has to do with willpower. It has to do with this emotional regulation of the folks with the radishes, how to manage their emotions. So just give it a pause for a minute. Is there a difference, do you think? Which group dealt with the puzzle better? So just kind of think about that for a moment. So the group that dealt with the puzzle the better, there was a big difference, was the chocolate chip cookie folks. And you can probably imagine that. And they stayed with it, so perseverance. And again, going back to this was only 5 minutes. Think about the stresses and the self-control we deal with all day long. This was 5 minutes. So in those 5 minutes, some of the people with the chocolate chip cookie stayed with it, perseverance, resilience, stayed with it for as long as 30 minutes. The average was 19 minutes that they stayed with it in what was an impossible task. The radish people, the average for them, because they burned up their willpower, their self-control, they could only stay with it for 8 minutes. That was the average. And those 8 minutes were irritated. They were upset. They were, telling the experimenter this was a dumb experiment. I don't know why I'm doing this, and they were upset with them. So they burned through it just with this sense of emotional self-control. So some of the consequences of all this, if you're not managing your emotions, and we're also going to talk about some of the thoughts and stuff, mistakes, blunders, loss of money, loss of jobs, flawed execution. But also if you're a leader, this is your credibility that can be on the line really, really quickly. That if something doesn't go well, you lose it with somebody else. You make a decision, you make a mistake. It can be very, very costly. So we know stress, we talked about, is number one killer. We know all these aspects, of one of the consequences of failed focus. So this is on the physical side. On the mental side, some of the work of Dan Relly, particularly Irrational, is thinking about the decision process. When I work with organizations and teams, you look at all the different processes, the sales process, the hiring process. Do you look at your decision-making process? Often executives don't. It's kind of random, whatever seems to be their way of doing it. It's probably the most important one, and because when we think of these decision errors, are we too positive? Is our whole team confirming what the leader is saying? There can be errors in attribution. Are we too negative? Do we bring up only what could go wrong? Or we have an illusion of control. We think we're out of control, or uncertainty. We don't estimate it right. Or what happens, I think, mostly on this side, we just don't think about that much. Daniel Kahneman basically said this slow thinking, which is what I'm advocating. How do we take a little bit more time? He said we're lazy. We just don't want to think that hard. We take shortcuts. We quickly think our thoughts are facts. And then we get flooded with our emotions, and that's the hijack. And if people have heard of the parable of the boiling frog, it's these little cues that we miss. And for a frog, if you put them in a pot of cold water and then you turn up the heat, it misses the cues that, it's getting a little hotter. It keeps missing the cues until it actually boils. What are the cues that you may be missing, either about your own stress, about your people, about your focus? And from brain neuroscience, what it tells us, if you had the brain can be in one place or another. And analysis, all these aspects is kind of the shiny light of the day. It's the problem. It's the task. It's what we're reactive to. And our brain goes right to this left-hand column. The slow thinking, we come back to this if we have time. And what happens? The figure ground, this stuff all goes to the background. I'll give feedback when I have some time. I'll hold that one-on-one when I'm able to. I'll talk to my significant other, when I'm not feeling so stressed. All those things get put into the background. And so that's, one of the problems. So if you think about all this and you think about failed focus, one of the things I want to tell you about, as an opportunity for you, is I have these 20 videos, that are about focus, and it's going to help curb what we're calling some of the stinking thinking and some of the things that can help you. So it's an opportunity for you that I'll talk a little bit about. And the reason that we want to do that is if you're a leader, are you being off automatic and directing what you want people to think and focus on? So if we think about the mind to the brain regulates information and energy. It focuses where we want to put our energy. Well, you are the mind of the organization. And so you regulate what kind of information you need, what kind of energy. I need this by the end of the day. Don't worry about that. We'll do that later. It's this constant prioritization that we have to deal with because there's always the shiny light. And so are you being really clear about the attention and focus that you want your people to, shine their light on? So you see the spotlight here, or the target. These are two metaphors that, going back to what we said, insight times empathy times clarity. Are you being clear that people know exactly what the target is? Are you being clear, focus on this, don't focus on that? And the reason it's so important, you are the thermostat for the team. The leader is the thermostat for the team. And how you feel, the team feels. How you interpret things, the team is going to interpret things. What you focus on, they're going to focus on. And are you setting the right temperature, which could be the climate, for the team? So this is an important concept. And here's a quick little focus quiz. And I'll ask you in a minute how many yeses you have, because it's really simply seeing how much are we on automatic. So answer yes if you regularly do this. Do you pick up your cell phone at most breaks to call or check emails or text? So there's a break in a meeting, and are you picking up your cell phone, within those first couple minutes? So just think about that one. Do you eat mindlessly while doing something else? You're reading, you're working at your computer. It's like, oh, I'm eating, so let me do the second thing. Therefore, you're probably not being aware and mindful of what you're eating. One of the consequences, we all do this, I do this, you eat too much because you're not even thinking about what you're eating. Or worse, you're not enjoying it. So think about that for you. Do you interrupt others before they finish? Thinking you know what they're saying. And in your relationships, this lack of focus can really derail some of your relationships. And do you miss opportunities to praise others because you're focusing on the problem, you're focusing on the task, and what you're not focusing on is that person and what they're doing well and what you could talk to them about. And another key one around focus is, do you work through your lunch and breaks? Either don't take a break or you grab something really quick and you're right back in front of the computer. So there's 5 things. Just type in how many yeses did you have. And again, maybe we won't even give the names, Cheryl, on this, but just to kind of get an idea, because we're all guilty of this. So how many of those 5 would you say, yes, I do that? Just type in your number.
One person said 2, one person said 3, 4, 2, 5, yes on most.
Okay. So we're all guilty of this, and so am I. Just this idea of kind of staying in the moment really is what this 20-day program is going to be about. That it's going to allow you to look at the fuel, and I'll tell you in a second what this SOAR, many of you have said SOAR, don't stress, so we'll talk about some of this idea to help give you energy around this SOAR acronym, and that's where we get fuel. And then this aspect of these EQ competencies, which are kind of the drivers or the train to help you raise the bar and get to where you want. So what I'm going to highlight is this is a free opportunity for you. It's a trial of this 20-day program, and you get a chance to look at our website and have an opportunity to look around and partake in some of these aspects that I'm going to walk you through now, and see if this is something that's going to help for you. It'll be a fit for you. So you get this kind of free trial to check things out, and I'll talk more about that. There's a slide about it. Jon Kabat-Zinn started this focus around awareness in the 70s. And what is an awareness? And it's one of the EA competencies. Awareness, the awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So I think that almost that last part is really important, because without us knowing it, again, that part of the brain quickly is solving problems and seeing problems that may not even be there, and we can be judgmental. It's quickly, that's that fast thinking. But can you stay in the slow thinking and just watch? So some of the aspects of SOAR, and this would be some daily activities to bring back your focus, bring back your mindfulness, and I'll walk through these. One is to savor, and I'll talk about that, to really take in and be in the moment. Savor what you're eating. Savor the relationship. Savor being outside. The O is observe your thoughts, and we'll talk about that instead of being married to them. The A is act with compassion for yourself and others. And then the R squared, or 2 R's, are risk-taking and recharging. So are you doing that? And this idea of savoring, slow down and take in the moment. So you kind of see these pictures here. Can you unplug? This would be a challenge for you. And I'm going to try to also do the same thing. And in the 20-day challenge, a lot of this is to give you guidance and how can you do this. So one challenge would be the next time you're at a restaurant with your friends, family, and someone gets up to go to the restroom, can you just be present and not jump on your phone? I mean, all of us, oh, okay, I got a moment. Did I get an email? Should I get a text? Be in the moment. Be with, with either your food, or just enjoy the moment. These are small things. These are these micro initiatives that can have a macro impact, or truly listen to others. So it's the being versus the doing. We're so sucked into the doing. One of the things of kind of savoring and being mindful is a shuttle exercise. And I'm just going to give you a quick example, because it kind of brings you into the moment. There's an internal awareness and an external awareness. So I'll do it right now. So internal awareness, I'm aware of my breath. I just put my hand on my stomach. External awareness, I'm aware of my office. I have a picture of my family. I see my mom's picture here. Internal awareness, I can feel a little sense of compassion for my mom because she's no longer here, so I feel that inside. External, now I'm looking at other aspects around my desk. Internal, I can feel some of the quietness as I slow down. And then external, I'm looking back at my screen. So I just did 3 internal, 3 external, but it brings you into the moment. So this is one of the flexibility skills, and it can allow you to say, okay, what am I doing now? Where am I? That would be a simple, exercise to do. Observing your thoughts. Are you a thought shopper, or are you a compulsive buyer? So one of the analogies I like to use, and this is kind of more recent, your thoughts are kind of like this buffet table, and all of this food is laid out. Well, those are all your thoughts. You're not going to each one and grabbing it and throwing it in your mouth, but for some reason we think because I thought it, therefore it's true. And because I thought it, my thoughts are facts. Everything I think, I got to take. And the idea is to step back and almost select, like you would select this food, you would select the appropriate thoughts. Is this good for me? Is this constructive? Is this rational? Is this going to get me what I want? What's the end in mind? Just those questions, and this is what in this 20-day focus we'll walk you through and have more opportunities to really practice this, having me as your coach, as your guide. Each of the videos are probably no more than 10 minutes. They're all about 5 or 6 minutes. But each day we'll kind of look at some of these different aspects. So this one I like, to just step back, and people that I work with seem to enjoy this one. Compassion. Are you acting with compassion for yourself and others? So who are you better with? Are you better showing compassion for others? Are you better showing compassion for yourself? Often I think we may show compassion for others, like we said before, enough with others, or are we doing it enough for ourselves? Are you showing enough compassion with yourself? And so there's a daily awareness about compassion and actions around each of these SOAR activities. And the last of the SOAR activities are, can you take some risks? Or are you taking the safe way every time? Now, I would say, you don't want to take a risk in every opportunity, but when you come to that fork in the road, growth for you and your team and others, can you take some constructive risks? And then the last part of the second R is recharge. And recharging is, are you doing some kind of mindfulness exercise? In the 20-day focus, there's some apps that we talk about and some ways, if you haven't done this, to recharge. Right now, there's so much around this mindfulness, how it changes the brain, that it's almost against medical advice to not do some kind of exercise. So it'll give you an opportunity in this challenge to walk through that. And then each day we'll look at the EQI competencies. These are the key things that allow someone to be a high performer. And so if you look at this model, each day we'll look at what self-regard mean. Another day is what does assertiveness mean. Another day is problem solving. And you'll get a chance as this is the vehicle, for your energy, to get you to be a top performer. Or maybe this is for your team, or maybe there's some things you bring to your team. So you'll get a little more of an in-depth look at what these are, and then a practice about this. And some of you already know this, but why emotional intelligence? IQ and expertise helps you get your job. But as you move up, you're doing less of what you did initially, and everybody's smart. So therefore, that becomes an equalizer. The people who move up in an organization typically have more EQ. And so that's one of the, the reasons and the rationale for this. So here's just an idea of some of the tools that we'll go through. I highlighted a couple of them, but it'll kind of give you an idea what some of these acronyms are. And this is, hopefully you'll see this as a 20-day kind of jump start. If you have any kind of goals and things that you want to focus on, you're going to get a jump start. You're going to have me as your coach to move forward with this. And these are some of the things that we'll look at. There's a formula for how do you deal with your feelings, and you'll get an idea of what this wah-wah and weight is. Are you using your successes in excess? These are some of the things that we'll look about. So in this trial period, the bonus is this 20-day video program. And what I'm looking at is having, a lot of people have wanted more information about emotional intelligence and having this membership site where, for a small amount, you can each month be getting some of these key things. So I mentioned I have a internet radio show where there's a MP3 of the month. We interviewed Daniel Goleman and Jim Kouzes. We're going to interview on Monday. These are leadership gurus. So not only will you have those coming available to you, but in the website, there's a lot of information on the website that you can use for yourself and others. And then every month, I will select one of these audio PDFs. If you haven't seen this, it's a audio, like a transcript of this interview with some of these key folks, like you see Goldsmith, Marshall Goldsmith, Daniel Goleman, Ken Blanchard, Jim Kouzes I mentioned, Martin Seligman. And so we picked their brain, myself, my co-host, Dr. Kathy Greenberg. You'll get a transcript of that along with the audio. So you could read along the transcript, but you also get the audio that's embedded. It's kind of a cool thing. So once a month you'll get one of those. On the website there is these profiles. 2 things from my book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. You actually get the first 2 chapters too, are these 2 self-assessments. So you may want to see where am I, where is somebody else. And then what I'm really excited about is once a month we're going to have these EI Hangout on Google+, where actually I'll be on the line and we'll have video where we'll give some updates and you can come in, ask us some questions, and we'll look at some of these SOAR best practices. And the last part of this is if you're interested in this and you sign up, I'm going to be also doing a monthly webinar around an EI topic. Well, you're going to get the first one for free. So here's this bit.ly. And so here's kind of a summary of stuff, and then we'll give you some information and answer questions. So here's all the aspects. If you think this is going to work for you, I'd love to have you be a part of this and being able to kind of share in this. It's a limited offer, only until March 14th. That is, as a charter member, it's $27 a month. it's basically the price of a book. So one of those audio PDFs, but you're really getting all the other, aspects. It comes out to about $200 of value of a month. But that's going to go up, in a couple of weeks, so in March 14th. But so I'd love to have you as a charter member. If you sign up, by Friday, there's an article that I wrote, Handling the Hijack. And so that's just a bonus, kind of an impetus for you to go for it. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And let me see if we have some questions. Right now we're just over the 40-minute mark or so. So what questions may you have? Either about the content is fine or anything about this membership, but I'd love to be able to answer some of your questions. So Cheryl, do we have anything coming in?
I don't have anything yet.
Okay.
If anyone would like to talk, ask Relly some questions, you can hit *6, and then it'll ask you to hit 1 if you'd like to ask a question, and you'll be in the queue. Or you can type it in your chat box.
So as we're doing that, I'm going to give you, maybe a last little giveaway, just from, like I said, I'm very kind of tool-based. And what this one is this idea of POWRR. POWRR almost spells like the word. But when you're with your people, and if you are a leader or on a team, what does it stand for? Are you pointing out, as a POW, pointing out what is right and repeated? So how do you take your leadership into make it into a process and point out what they're doing well, and then point out what you'd like to see them do even better, or make it into a process. Often they do so many things, and they don't know what to repeat. So it's a good acronym to kind of keep in mind. Point out what's right and repeated. How do you turn a success into a process? All right. Anything else? Cheryl, have we got any other questions from folks?
Yes, there was one from Greg. He says, Relly, help me understand the emotional control I would exert if I were in front of the radishes.
Oh, help you understand that. Oh, if you were in front of the radishes? Well, part of that would be, and again, this is, Greg, this is that part of your brain. It's the same part of the brain that's got your cognitive executive functioning. It's got emotional regulation. So you're probably salivating. And I'm starting to salivate as I think about this now with the cookies. You're salivating, and then, so one is kind of physical. You have to control that. And then mental, probably some of the mental things you're saying is, wait, this is not fair. How come they got that? Well, how come I didn't get that? You have all this going on, which you're trying to monitor and self-control. So one is the internal talk and maybe frustration around fairness, and the other is kind of any of the physiological aspects that are going on, to manage that. Radishes are not the most appealing thing, and I'd rather have one of those chocolate chip cookies. So that's kind of that aspect. Thanks, Greg, for the question.
Greg also says, I see, are there others eating the cookies?
Yes. You're in the exact same room. Yeah. So if that wasn't clear, half the room has got chocolate chip cookies, half the room's got radishes. So you're observing them, and that's why you have to manage your self-control. All right. Cheryl, anything else?
There's one other question about downloading the PowerPoint, that we will be sending out the webinar.
Yes. And so the way this works, if you join, and again, I'll just reiterate that, you have 20 days to, we'll ask for your credit card. We will not do anything with it until 20 days. So you can look around, and one of the things that you can see is this PowerPoint. And so if you say, okay, yeah, this is good, and you stay with it, then you'll have access to the website and the bonuses. If you choose not to do it, this will only be available, for the 20 days. And basically, it's available on the website, so it's not listed like you're going to be able to download it per se, but you better go, see it on the website and have access to it. Plus, you're going to have access to all the other tools, the assessments, and some of those. And some of those, there's articles and PDFs, so some of those are downloadable. So in those 20 days, there are some downloadable things that you could do. And if you, stay with it, then this first webinar, which again will be around emotional intelligence and then zeroing in on why it's important, you're going to have, it's a $195 value. That'll be for free. So we're trying to encourage you, motivate you to, stay with it.
Relly, we have a couple of questions in the queue.
Okay.
Here's the first one.
Hi, Relly. This is Pat Arroyo.
Hi, Pat.
Great. Yeah, great to hear this stuff. Just a question about your SOAR model.
Yes.
Because when I think about stress, I think about all the energy drains and
yes.
the distractors and all that sort of stuff. Things we don't address in our life that just drain our energy and so forth. Would you put that into this model, or where would it go into that model?
Where would the stress go into that model?
Yeah, the things that drain our energy because maybe there's the distractors or things that we haven't addressed in our life that are creating stress.
So those are all kind of the precursors, and so at least the way I'm looking at this is the SOAR model is getting you, helping you modulate the stress, modulate the distractors, all those things that I went through. So the distractors, the interruptions, the stress, so these are some of the things that can be on the positive side. So if you think about the kind of the positive psychology, these are practices that can counteract the stress, counteract the distractions. So if you get that quiet time, you're better able to deal with some of those frustrations. You're better able to kind of monitor your thoughts. If you're connecting with compassion, a lot of the research, and I know you know this, Pat, that, if you're actually giving to others, you're going to feel better. So a lot of these are inoculation to the things that you're saying. So they're kind of the intervention, prevention side of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Good. Thanks. Glad to have you.
And there's one more.
Hi, Relly. This is Gloria Mealy.
Oh, hi, Gloria.
Hi. Great webinar. Thank you very much for all the info. I had a question about the Google Hangouts, the monthly Google Hangouts.
Yes.
Are they going to have a specific topic, or will they just be kind of an open discussion? What's your plan for those?
Yeah. So part of that is it's going to be like an EI update, so what is some kind of current information. But then for the folks that are on it, it's probably going to be looking back at some of the SOAR things. And so one of it can be saying, okay, so what, Savor. What's anybody done that's helped you in savoring? What's anybody done that's been helpful in regard to taking risks? So it becomes kind of a working hangout, where people can answer questions. And I'm figuring, Gloria, maybe a half hour, so it's just a good way to kind of connect on what's new. It's a good way to talk about challenges and maybe share some best practices.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, good. Okay, well, I think we've covered that, so thank you so much. I'm sure there's some more information, if you log in and, to the link there, and you'll see some more information. And then this webinar will be available, as a replay, but probably until the March 14th. And then if you sign up, then you'll have access to it, that and plus all the other things we're talking about. So thank you so much. I'm glad we got a good turnout, and thanks for your questions and your participation.